before the hero, before the sword beneath the stone, before the labyrinth, there was fear. Not the fear of monsters, but the fear of interruption. The fear that a kingdom might not continue beyond itself. Athens stood suspended between order and uncertainty, and at its center sat a king without an heir. Aegeus, a ruler surrounded by walls, yet unable to see the future beyond them. And so, like many before him, he journeyed toward the sacred, toward Delphi, toward the place where human certainty dissolves into symbol. But the oracle did not speak plainly. The sacred rarely does. Its language moves through image, through paradox, through meanings folded within meanings. And the king was told, "Do not loosen the mouth of the wineskin until you return to the heights of Athens." But Aegeus could not understand. And perhaps this is where the story truly begins, not with courage, not with destiny, but with consciousness standing before mystery, unable to interpret what it sees. Because there is a difference between seeking wisdom and being able to receive it. The king approached the divine, yet remained blind to the language through which the divine speaks. And so the future passed quietly into the hands of another, Theseus of Troezen, a man who understood symbols, a man who could read beneath appearances. But awareness does not always become wisdom. Theseus saw opportunity within prophecy, a bloodline, a throne, a doorway hidden inside fate itself. And so sacred knowledge became strategy, mystery became leverage, destiny became something to manipulate. Again and again within myth, human beings attempt to possess what was meant to remain sacred, to control what was meant to be entered humbly, to own what can only truly be encountered. And perhaps this is where the shadow first enters the story of Theseus. Not simple greed, but the desire to shape destiny itself. Yet beneath the ambitions of kings, another force was already moving. That same night, Aethra walked toward the sea, toward the ancient waters, toward the breathing darkness associated with Poseidon. And beneath the gaze of the primordial deep, another union took place. So the child who would become Theseus was born between worlds, between civilization and the unconscious, between order and something ancient moving beneath it. Perhaps this is why the myth never tells us clearly who his true father was, because some beings emerge carrying more than one inheritance. And so Theseus was not raised in Athens, not within the palace, not within the structures waiting to call him heir. He was raised beyond the center, at the edge, as though transformation itself must first grow outside the systems it is destined to confront. This pattern echoes throughout myth: the hidden child, the exiled heir, the consciousness born beyond the walls of the known world. And before leaving Trozen, Aegeus concealed two objects beneath an enormous stone: a sword and a pair of sandals. If the boy grew strong enough to lift the weight, he was to recover them and journey to Athens. But perhaps the stone was never merely a test of strength. Perhaps it symbolized something far older: pressure, burden, the psychic weight beneath which consciousness sleeps. Because deep within every human life, something remains buried, something waiting to be uncovered consciously. And beneath the stone rested two paths of becoming: the sword and the sandals. The sword is not only violence, it is discernment, the ability to cut through illusion, to separate truth from distortion, to see clearly. And the sandals, they do not conquer, they walk. They represent movement, the willingness to enter the unknown consciously. If the sword divides, the sandals connect. And Theseus does not inherit these symbols easily. He uncovers them himself. This matters, because the deepest capacities within us are rarely handed down fully formed. They must be lifted from beneath the weight of conditioning, fear, identity, and inherited structure. And eventually, the time comes to leave. The stone has been lifted, the inheritance revealed, the path opened. But there are two roads to Athens, one safe, one dangerous, and Theseus chooses the harder road. Because the journey is not practical, it is initiatory. He does not travel merely to arrive. He travels to become. And along the road, he encounters distorted forms of power. Periphetes, the club bearer, brute force shaped into domination. Cenis, who bends nature itself toward destruction. Skyron, who humiliates before annihilating. And finally, Procrustes, perhaps the most terrifying of them all. The man who forces every traveler to fit the shape of the bed, stretching what is too small, cutting away what exceeds the frame. And perhaps this remains one of civilization's deepest shadows. The pressure to compress living consciousness into fixed forms, to force the soul into structures incapable of holding its full complexity. But another pattern moves beneath the violence. Each time Theseus defeats these figures, he mirrors them. He absorbs aspects of what he overcomes. And the myth asks us quietly, what remains within us after confrontation? What enters identity through struggle? What crystallizes around conquest, recognition, and survival? Because the forces we battle do not always disappear. Sometimes They wait beneath the surface, beneath the hero, beneath the self-image, beneath the certainty of becoming someone important. And eventually, Theseus reaches Athens, the city of his father, the center toward which his entire life has been moving. Yet when he arrives, no one recognizes him. The heir enters the kingdom as a stranger. And perhaps this too is symbolic, because new consciousness rarely appears familiar to the systems it will eventually transform. Beside Aegeus now stands Medea, sorceress, exile, bearer of hidden sight. And unlike the king, she sees the danger immediately. The hidden heir has returned. Succession stands at the gates. Once again, the intuitive sees what authority cannot yet perceive consciously. But insight without wisdom becomes fear, and fear becomes poison, literally. A cup is prepared, a silent death hidden within civilization itself. Not violence from outside the walls, but corruption emerging from within them. And perhaps the myth reveals something unsettling here. The greatest threats to consciousness are not always found in chaos beyond the city. Sometimes they emerge quietly inside the palace, inside the system, inside ourselves. But at the final moment, Theseus reveals the sword. The hidden inheritance rises into visibility. And suddenly, the king sees. The cup falls from his hand. The stranger becomes son. The initiate becomes heir. The traveler becomes symbol. And this is where the story begins to change, because from this moment onward, Theseus no longer walks only toward self-discovery. Now he walks toward history, toward legacy, toward the terrible gravity of becoming a hero. But perhaps the deeper question is not whether Theseus entered the labyrinth. Perhaps the question is whether we already have. What distorted forces still wait along the road within us? What identities have we constructed from struggle? What parts of ourselves were shaped by systems we believed we were resisting? And if consciousness truly seeks wholeness rather than domination, what would it mean to walk the path without becoming trapped by the masks formed along the way? Because the road to Athens was never the end of the journey, it was only the beginning. And somewhere ahead, beneath stone, beneath memory, beneath civilization itself, the labyrinth waits. If this path resonated with you, there are more journeys waiting within the labyrinth. More myths, more symbols, more forgotten realms waiting to be remembered. Continue the journey,